Hope you're all doing well. Thank you so much for coming. So I'll start with the name of Allah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulihil Ameen. So fellow beings, you saw the flyer. Pretty much everybody saw the flyer, Islam 101. Now when you Google Islam 101, a lot of universities actually even offer a course called Islam 101, fundamentals of Islam, Islam in America, for instance, at Western. Most of the time what I find troubling, not all the time, not everywhere, but a lot of places, it's a very structured introduction to Islam. Like, okay, this is what they believe in, then they pray 5 times a day, then they fast once every year, and then they give charity, and then they go to Hajj, and that's all Islam. You take world religions, world religions. Has anybody taken world religions? Okay. You take world religions, you take Islam 101, or sometime even Islamic traditions. This is exactly how Islam gets introduced to most of the public, which then puts an impression in the minds of people like, okay, man, these guys, like, are they what, monks or what? They're always praying 5 times a day, fasting, once a month, not once a month, once a year for a whole month, and then there's a lot of volunteer fasting too. And these guys must be like, man, some holy people living on earth, like saints or something. And then when you have this very high expectation of like very, very high level of modesty, you start to look at Muslims as in a superficial way, you know what I mean? And sadly, these standards do not apply to other religions. It's interesting that Islam always gets a very interesting treatment, sometime in a good way, sometime in a bad way. This is a good one, where it's a very hi-fi introduction, okay? I'm going to try to avoid that, basically. So I'll ask you first things first. Some of you might have taken courses in Islam, but those of us who have no background with Islam, or you were not born in a Muslim household, when you saw the flyer, Islam 101, what did you expect? Or when you hear Islam, not just on the flyer, saw it elsewhere also, what comes to mind? What are the key words that you would associate the religion with? So I'm going to ask from this side, yeah?
Deeper explanation.
Deeper explanation. Any names that comes to your mind? Explanation about what, for instance? Give me something, one aspect.
Faith.
Faith. And then faith in some deity, right? Does that come to mind? Anybody else from this side of the audience?
Broken down, starting from the bottom up.
Like some words, like key words, what comes to your mind? Like you said. Over here, on this side.
Because I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of the history of Islam, but understanding how the culture developed around the religious practice, and also like the traditional ceremonies and deeper cultural parts of that. That's something that I don't have an understanding of, and that's kind of what I was thinking might get lightly touched on.
Nice, okay. So expectations, some words, explanation, understanding, faith. Monotheism, does that recall anything? Monotheism, right? That comes to mind about Islam. Almost everybody that knows anything about religions, specifically Abrahamic religions, will say, oh yeah, Islam has something to do with it. Now, over the last few years, before it used to be Judeo-Christian traditions, now Islam is slowly and surely has started to be considered. And it should be considered. It should be part of the mainstream academic world, because you can't isolate Islam. Islam has everything to do with Abraham, just like Judaism and Christianity has, for instance. It should be considered that way. Otherwise, you're ignoring a huge chunk of global population. We're talking about 2 billion people across the globe, spread over 56 countries that are primarily majority Muslim countries, and then not to mention all the population that lives in North America, European countries, and other places where there are minorities, but even as minorities, there are in millions, huge numbers. For instance, the Muslims as the greatest minority are living in what country? Highest in numbers, and they're still a minority. One country that comes to mind. Huh? India. Close to 250 million Muslims, because India is 1.1 billion people, but still 250 million people just in one country is a big number. So this is a religion of a very diverse, very dynamic, and big world that covers from north to south, east to west, every place you could think of. Maybe not Antarctica, leaving Antarctica out. So, my friends, basic thing is, in Islam, there is a fundamental concept. It's the concept of a creator, a master planner behind all things. Okay? That is, in Islam, it's considered God, Allah, a divine being who planned everything. So number one, he planned. Then he executed the plan. He created cosmos, the galaxies, planets, stars, whatever you can think about, whatever we have discovered so far, and maybe there's a lot to be discovered. All of these things, there's a master planner and then the executor. Now, how he executes, that could be understood or questioned. Some things he executed just by allowing it to happen, be, and it became. Some things he actually planned them and did them in a very careful manner, for instance, or very meticulous manner, I would say. For instance, the humankind. So, and this is all, I'm talking Islam. You don't have to agree with this. I'm telling you what Islam claims. And actually, you might find some resonation with Judaism and Christianity too about that. But in Islam, there is a lot of in-depth study about that. Now, humankind, human race, is something very unique. Islam claims that this is one of the only races probably that has been created by the hand of God. And there is a dialogue about that actually, where God says to Lucifer, Lucifer, or Muslims call him Iblis, Shaitan, Satan. He told Lucifer, the main guy, the main culprit, that, hey, I created him or her, you and I, with my own hand, Adam. And of course, Eve is also part of Adam. I created this with my own hand. How could you judge my work? Yet everything is mine. Everything is my creation. And this is a special one. And you judge the most special of all? What's wrong with you? Like, why did you do it? Give me an explanation. You better have a good explanation. And of course, he didn't have a better explanation other than just ego and pride, arrogance, and then, what happened. So now this human race, now this is where Islam becomes interesting, was from day one planned to be here. That's where Islam differs from the previous two traditions. Is a minor difference where it says, okay, he said, my plan is to send these people here. Now, can you imagine that you are told to go somewhere, you're told to move somewhere, or you're given a big factory or a machine or something to operate, and then you're given no reference manual, nothing, no directions, no instructions. And then can you imagine that the place you're at, which is not yours, by the way, we're talking about Earth, it's like you're renting this place. You're here for only a purpose. So he chose for you to be here. So he's the planner. He's saying you have to go there. There must be something behind that. There must be a plan. Otherwise, it can't be just, okay, let me throw you out over here. Can't be that. Can't be haphazard, because everything, and this is, this creation is a very special one. It's like very meticulous work. He said, my hand. He never said this for the planets, for the galaxies, for the cosmos, for all the skies and the heavens and the earth or whatever. Nothing, he said, I created with my own hand. Now, when I say hand, in Islam, it doesn't mean hand like your hand and my hand. This is beyond that. If I limited it to my hand, like our hands look like, then it's not God. It's not something infinite. This is beyond me. The minute I captured something in a box, like, this is it. I got God. I got God. No. Put a no with it, not yet. There's a lot to discover. So this meticulous job, this great, excellent, miraculous creation that we are today, it starts with the one, and then of course He allows them to multiply, must have a reason, must have a purpose. And then people who ravage, I take an issue, we had an interfaith gathering about environment. Some religious, sometime inside Islam and sometime other folks also, they consider that this earth is for them, so all the resources, whatever they want to plunder, it's in their service, they can do whatever they want. But for a second, let's think about it, that some place that you don't really own, it wasn't yours from day one, wouldn't you be very careful in using it because you have to give it back? You have to leave it one day. It's like, you're living in a rental place. You can't destroy that property, right? This is all I'm talking about Islam from a very philosophical aspect where you understand how things are working, or how it is at least understood by the Quran or the scholars of Islam. You would use it as a trust. And that's exactly the very concept, depth of Islam, that this earth is a trust. You are trustees, and once you're a trustee has to have responsibilities. He has to, or he or she, they have to have obligations, certain commitments, and what have you. And then we spend a certain amount of time, then we go to our graves, and then we go back. The ultimate destination is not here, is back there, in the hereafter, from death until a final place. Could be eventually paradise, could be eventually hellfire, could be in between, and depending on the nature of things, how we did. But there is no original sin, the concept of original sin that, we were first supposed to be in heaven, we screwed up, Adam fell in the love of Eve forced him that, in her love, he was manipulated by her, and she did this and this and that, so all the blame goes to the poor women, and they are the cause of all problems. That's not Islam. This is a story that you may have heard in Genesis. It's a pre-Islamic story. But Islam denounces all of that. Now, my next question would be that what is the source for all this? Well, from day one, since God Almighty created the humanity or started humanity, He sent them instructions, and not only instructions, those who would teach them and guide them to live on those instructions. And those people are called prophets in Islam. Prophets kept reminding people where they came from, what they're supposed to do now since they're here now. And it is these prophets who kept reminding people that, no, you were not born to kill. You were not born as a sinner. You're not tainted with sin. I'm saying strictly from an Islam standpoint. This is where Islam sort of differs a little bit from the original sin concept. There's no original sin. Yes, they made a mistake, but they fixed it. They asked God to forgive, and He forgave them, and that was the end of the story. All right? And then, now, I'm sure when you hear of Islam, you always hear Muhammad, right? Peace be upon him. Now, the faith says that from Adam till Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, I'm mentioning only a few names, the big ones, throughout the human history, or throughout the prophetic history, all the way till Muhammad, these people were working on one job, one goal, which is to live your life in a proper way, in a good way, live as good humans, good citizens, not like, your purpose is not just to, eat, sleep, eat, drink, marry, and then just die maybe. That you have a bigger purpose, which is to make this place beautiful, make this place nice, show the humanity that this is what, and show even the Lucifer that, see, God, we were not a mistake of God. See, we were supposed to do good. See, we are making things better here. Yes, we fail, we flip, but we come back, we fix things. This was the objective of every prophet's teachings, to guide people who you are, where you came from, what are you going to do, what's the purpose of your life, dude? Fix your life. Your life is not just here to eat, drink, and marry, and then khalas, khalas means like end of the story, have kids and then die, retire somewhere by the lake. That's it. Animals could do that better than us, actually. They plan maybe much better than us. They have lots of planning. They can predict even things happening to them even before us. With all the technology still there ahead of us in predicting like storms and earthquakes and whatnot. So these prophets were always reminding people, teaching people what you're supposed to do, what should you do, How should you lead your life? How should you use these reference manuals? And these reference manuals are their teachings, directions, directives, guidelines that God Almighty intended for people. Now, over time, these teachings got lost, they got corrupted, tampered with. A lot of these things happen. Now, according to Islam, Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the last of this chain, last of these, guided people to guide humanity. And he said, I am the last one. God will preserve my message because God has promised me so, because this is it. If this also gets lost, even if this gets destroyed, then humanity has all the excuses to not follow the right thing, Because see, ethics and morality change from area to area. When it's given in the hands of humans, something is legal today, tomorrow it's illegal. Something is good today, tomorrow is bad. Or bad today and tomorrow is good. Vice versa. Who decides that? There has to be something that is above these humans, because we all have biases. We have prejudices. We try to work around those, but we need something higher. A bigger force than just us. Otherwise, we will run into chaos. And we have millions of corpses on these ideologies that were invented by men, invented by people, actually mostly men, practically men. But when we say men, we could mean humans, but I say practically men. They invented or came up with these ideologies and then forced people to live on those. And those who did not live, it's like corpses after corpses, We got into problems. So there has to be somebody that is above us. Because we mess up things a lot. We need that direction. So that's why this last message had to be preserved, ought to be preserved. Otherwise, humanity was lost. We had nothing, man. Everything has problems. Everything has contradictions. Everything has issues. There has to be something that is pure, that is uncorrupted. And that's where Quran comes in. Quran becomes the fundamental source of guidance for all Muslims, and of course teachings of all the prophets of Allah. The beauty is that in Islam, no prophet is to be disrespected. No messenger of God. They're all to be honored. They're all to be respected. Now, how about their teachings? Now, Prophet Muhammad said any of their teachings that match the common, take them. Wise sayings, for instance. A wise saying, for instance, African proverbs are very famous among the Muslim community. He says, wise saying, a wise statement, a wisdom is believers' thing. Take it, wherever you get it from, no problem. Al-hikmatu dalatul mu'min. Right? Those who understand Arabic, I just narrated a saying of the Prophet. He says, wisdom is a believer's thing. Even if it's wisdom to heal people, medicine. That's why Muslims flourished in all these, not just religious faculties, these human faculties of development, whether it's medicine, whether it's all kinds of other sciences, mathematics, and astronomy, lenses. When we had this eclipse, I think earlier this year, January or February time, there was an eclipse, right? There was a lot, and then there was a solar eclipse last year, right? There was a big one, and people talked about, there was lots of viral videos how to make a camera or like a filter at home so that you can see the eclipse without damaging your eyes, right? Does anybody recall doing that? How many of you remember that? Yeah? So, who invented that? Muslims invented that. Lenses is an invention of Muslims. Many of you should make dua every day, even if you're not Muslim, say, God bless this guy, Ibn al-Haytham, I think. Ibn al-Haytham was one of the scientists who invented lenses. prisms, lenses, eye surgeries. First cataract surgery was done in that Syria, which is now today destroyed because of some internal and external things. That Syria was the Harvard, was the school of medicine, surgeries, first hospitals, Baghdad as another capital. So Islam has contributed a lot toward the civilization, because the ultimate goal of Islam is not to force people. In fact, it's to teach people, guide them, give them something that they will say, yeah, this is just natural. It's nothing against me. It's for my own good. Why would God tell me, for instance, don't drink alcohol, don't take all these drugs, intoxication, other things? Because when people take it, there's problems. And then of course, people will argue, well, how about socially allow that? Yes, actually, there is a study done, we can talk all day about it. Most alcoholics, for instance, were first social drinkers. So in Islam, there's this philosophy, dar'il mafasid, block the doors of evil. Anywhere there can be evil coming from, just block that. Don't put people in a weaker position. A lot of these, gender rules, men and women not, getting too close to each other, or all these, modesty guidelines. It's not for oppression, whether it's men or women. It's to give us that respect for one another, that we don't look at each other based on what kind of body she has, or how hot he looks or she looks. No, we maintain that respectful boundaries between us, and then we work together as good fellow citizens, not become as a, display or show. Now, but that's something very, very minimal part of Islam. The bigger part of Islam is all about civil rights, values, good morals, good ethics, teachings. Why there is prayers 5 times a day? Why there is fasting? Because prayers and fasting are supposed to guide our day-to-day lives. That's their purpose. It's not for the sake of rituals. Same thing goes for Hajj. Same thing goes for zakat. Now, zakat is charity, basically. Everybody knows, oh yeah, charity is great. But you see, even around charity, there's a lot of these strict moral boundaries. For instance, you can't announce that you are the one who's giving charity. It's highly discouraged to not mention your name. Why? Prophet said, actually, give with your right hand and the left doesn't know. And this is actually a common value that you can find it today, even today in the Bible. So you may find people who might have donated hundreds and thousands or millions to this university, but I don't think you would find some place with their names, because they usually, very, very rarely, even if their name does get put on somewhere, they will say, okay, just because, so that the community should know that Muslims have contributed to the well-being, not for the sake of show off. If I have this little intention of show off for anything, any good deed, not just charity, any good thing, it could be ritual, prayer, or helping somebody, taking somebody to the hospital, or visiting someone at the hospital, some homeless person, helping them. If I have this little intention that people should see me, so that when I'm running for the county election, I should get elected again, that's it. It will be great. It will be rewarded in this life, but forget it. No higher purpose. Remember we talked about higher purpose? This earth is a very temporary place. Nobody has achieved eternity here, and nobody will. No matter how much quality of life we improve, there is a limit. It's not a limitless place. So there is some place where there's going to be a bigger settlement of justice. I mean, think about it. I have a lot of people who don't believe in anything, people who are agnostics or atheists. One of their biggest problems is when they see things in this world that are unfair. I tell them, yes, you have a good point. A lot of things are not fair in this world. I said, then don't you think there should be some kind of settlement? Some place where all these dues will be settled, paid off, and affairs will be fixed? The real bad who got away maybe will be put to account. Shouldn't there be one? I said, well, yeah, that's exactly what my problem is, right, man? That's the problem. Like, exactly. That's what my problem is, that you should admit that there is that place. There is a place where these records will be straight. where things will be settled. If there was no day of judgment, this is one of the fundamental things in Islam. If there is no day of judgment, if there is no ultimate reward, if there is no ultimate consequence, then nothing can be justified. Nothing can be justified. It's true. That is why there is this concept of day of judgment. So unfortunately, as I said, when Islam is mentioned, a lot of these things are brushed away. They're not mentioned. Think about the family values how they are so strong in Islam. It's encouraged that families must be strong, taking care of one another as families and communities. It's part of Islam. Rights of children, rights of property, rights of the environment. Prophet said, even if you have a river in front of you, don't waste water. Even these little things. Showing compassion to the animals. He said, again, hell and heaven is a deterrence. It's not to lure people into things, and it's not to just keep people afraid. He said, a such and such lady, she went to hellfire because she had a cat and she tortured her, just because she got mad with her and she tortured her when they killed her. Because of that, she was reprimanded. Such and such man, he says, I see him carrying, he said literally, I see him carrying like rounds of earth around his neck. They said, oh, Prophet, what's that supposed to mean? It's in a metaphorical sense. He's saying it's the land that he stole from someone, land that he snatched away from somebody with oppression, gangsters and all that wild stuff. So he said, don't expect me to pray to God to help you if you have a murder on you, if you have this on you, if you have done this on people, this to people. Come with straight records. And then even if you are short in your day-to-day prayers, for instance, I'm not saying you should be short, for instance, if you are short behind in something, God will look after you, because that was very personal between you and God. But what was between God's creation, remember, He loves them as much He loves you too. So He's going to settle these accounts. So this is in a nutshell, very, very brief. This is, as I told you, this is a whole semester's course, Islam 101. There are courses taught in universities. I have, for about 2014, I started teaching in the Lifelong Learning Academy. This is where I put my foot into teaching here at Western. And then I started teaching at K College also. So I've been teaching a lot of these fundamental Islam courses. In fact, my doctoral research is also going to focus on how Islam is taught, and of course, hopefully with some, I'm very briefly mentioning some suggestions like how it should be taught instead, what kind of improvements that could be taking place, because the way our textbooks are selected, the way our curriculums are designed, the politics, the administrative politics, the department politics, the faculty's role, and a lot of stuff like that happens. And then of course, what kind of college is that? Is it liberal arts? Is it a public university? And all these things come into consideration. So my focus is going to be on that how should Islam be taught in this country that will make an impact. Because a lot of negativity and misinformation about Islam is rooted in academia also. So that's all I have to say. I didn't want to talk and talk. I want to leave time for you to ask questions, anything, even if it's not relevant, but it's about Islam. But please try to keep it relevant. That would be good. About religion, maybe some practices or what have you. It's up to you. So you can go ahead and ask questions.
So I have two questions. Would you say that Islam teaches you to be a better human? And if that's true, why does the media portray Muslims as being not the victims, but the victimizers or the oppressors?
It's a good question. Daim has asked a very interesting question that, okay, if Islam teaches this, that the goal of Islam is that, humanity, we should improve, we should live as good fellow humans, There's no other agenda, it's not like dominate the world and kill everybody that doesn't agree with you. That's not any agenda of Islam. So, but then why is Muslims are portrayed negatively? I'll tell you why. Muslims, Islam got in the limelight of the Western world during the time when colonial expansions were taking place. Okay, You have to understand that whenever there is an invading force, they're taking over somebody's place, they're not going to say, oh yeah, these innocent people were taking their land because we like it. No, no. They're going to make it look like that these people are messed up, we have a higher civilization and we're offering it to them. Believe it or not, we were studying Marxism last week here at Western, legal study of Marxism. Because we was like, what? Marxism, communism? Yes, we were actually studying communism. And then critique of communism also. And it was very disturbing that one doctoral candidate, no details, I don't want to give out any details, said something very horrible to justify all these occupations that colonials were doing and all these invasions of people's lands. So, oh, these people didn't, we talked about, these, during the French Revolution, there was a lot of things that were being imposed on people that they never welcomed it, right? So one of the students' response was, and he said, doctoral student, this might be a professor sometime soon, right? Said, oh, these people didn't know how to read, these people didn't know how to study, so they had to give them a higher culture. I'm like, yeah, right. Have you studied the history of slaves, for instance? Slave trade is also part of the package of colonial era, right? A lot of slaves actually were the ones who knew how to read and write. Slaves were the ones who knew how to read and write. And they were teaching their masters. They were doing their bookkeepings for them. So it has a lot to do with the history of colonialism. And then it's like Victor's version of oppressor versus oppressed. So that's how I would put it in a nutshell. Now, and then nowadays, in modern context, it has happened with the communists, it has happened with the Japanese, and there has always been someone in our human history that we will pick as the villain, and then we'll scare people like, yeah, this is someone that you have to be wary of. It's the Muslims these days. It's Muslims these days, We have many, many places where massacres after massacres are taking place. You name it. India, it's a horrible situation right now. Really horrible. Every other day people get mob lynched. It has become a common thing in India. Burma, let's not forget Burma. Or Rohingya people of Myanmar. It's a disaster. If it was up to me, first thing I would do is take the Nobel Peace Prize from Suu Kyi. What peace have you brought to that land? Right? She was first oppressed and stood against tyranny and all that, but now she is the tyrant. Or her whole regime, the whole military and all the firepower with that. And then, not to mention the catastrophes that happened in CFR, Central African Republic. And then the humanitarian disasters in Syria, where there's a lot of involvement of these groups that Muslims never owned, like ISIS, for instance. Where are they now? Right? These groups are not owned by Muslims. We don't know where they got all these weapons from. And there's a lot of questions to ask. So a lot of places in the world where Muslims are unfortunately the victims. It has a lot to do, and there is some weaknesses among Muslims also. So just like anybody else, the difference is that if today a person of color commits a crime, it's seen differently. If a person from a Caucasian race commits a crime, it's seen differently, mostly mentally ill. If it's a person of color and happens to be Muslim, then it's terrorism. One of the first things Muslims look at when there is an incident of this, for mass shootings, for instance, one of our plagues in this country, mass shootings, they look at his name, man. Okay, thank God. It's like, oof, bad, but not that bad. Okay, we're safe. It's like your own survival is now under question. It's not like they're happy that it's not our guy. It's like, okay, if it was this guy, then everybody has to pay the price. That doesn't happen to other communities. This is, I call selective humanity. So great question, loaded one. Yes, sir.
First of all, I'm laughing because I'm the same way. If I see a shooting, my first reaction is, what does that person look like?
Exactly.
Because of my color.
Oh, man.
But my question is, and this is, for me personally, I think generally, when people think think of Islam, they think of, like you said, prayer. So they hold that in high respect, that,
Yeah,
they're very religious.
Uh-huh.
And it's such an interesting juxtaposition because at the same vein, they really don't know much about
Uh-huh.
Islam. So how can we change that where people are more familiar, more aware of more than just prayer?
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the things has to be where Muslims also have an obligation is to affiliate with people, make friends on campus, tell people, ask a Muslim. I'll give you my own example. My department in comparative religion, comparative studies, religious studies, I had to return the key for one of the offices, okay? Thank you so much for coming. So I had to return the key. Now, I was reminded by one of the persons, the person that I have to give it to. So I told that person, like, look, it's not that intentionally I didn't bring it. In fact, I religiously owe it to you. She said, what do you mean, religiously you owe the key back to me? She said, there's no rush, Actually, this is just a change of, offices and all that, so I had to return that key. She said, what do you mean, Hafiz, like religiously? I'm like, yes, I religiously owe it to you because it's an amana. She said, what do you mean amana? I'm like, in Islam, anything that is not yours and is given to you by someone is considered a trust. And not returning a trust is considered a very bad thing. It's considered like a sin. So, oh my gosh, I didn't know this. I'm like, exactly. And she said to me that we should tell this to people about Muslims. They don't know this, that even to return something that you have taken, it's very casual for us to borrow somebody's book and then forget about it, right? Just 2 days ago, I was talking to one of my professors that a student, welcome. A student, I borrowed her book, one of my colleagues in the comparative studies, and I forgot to return it to her. And every day I'm thinking, like, how can I find her? So I asked one of my professors, I need to find her because I need to return her book back to her. So these little things, once people get to know, they will realize that, okay, the textbook, the Islam they're teaching in the textbook is just prayers, fasting, charity, and Hajj, and that's it. That's Islam. That's not Islam. That's a very tiny portion of Islam. In fact, it's great. 5 prayers a day is great. It works actually to guide all these things. Parental rights, family rights, rights of children, how children are cared for, all these little things. Healthcare, for instance, Islam and healthcare. Any religion, I respect, all religions, and then whatever they believe in. But if there is one religion that is in most harmony with medicine, always been, is Islam. Because Prophet Muhammad laid those foundations. People think Islam means just rituals. This is an example. I met a professor here in biomedicine, researches, on germs and all that. He says, there is a saying of Prophet where he said, every disease has a cure. You have to just find it, discover it. Is there a hadith like that? I said, yes. In his collections of sayings, it's called, his collections are, divided in different chapters, like book of faith, book of prayers, book of fasting. There is a book of medicine. Medicine. And the very first saying of the Prophet is this, that the book of medicine in Sahih al-Bukhari starts with this saying. Another example, he told people that, people use cauterization for treatment, people use this, cupping for treatment, and there was another third thing he mentioned. He said, I allow you all, but I don't recommend cauterization. He said that 1400 years ago, where there was no technology, nothing. How could that man be so much in harmony with things that are now being proven that, wow, it makes so much sense? So that's, those kinds of sayings guided Muslims that, yes, we need to work for, healthcare. We need to improve quality of life. Life is respected. Again, life is also a trust. Remember we talked about earth being a trust? Life is also a trust. So these little things that are actually very huge in Islam, if they are highlighted, people will say, and there is some change. I'll give you an example. In Duke, I believe, they established this the Department of Integration of Spirituality and Healthcare, where all these major world religions, they have these different they interact with the medical professionals and what have you. And Dr. Harold Koenig is one of the leading professors in this faculty, and he's a medical doctor. So they found basically what they do is they discover each religion's these aspects, and they found out that Islam has the most religious teachings that guide toward healthcare. Like, it's like there's no problem. You don't have to convince a patient like, this is necessary for you, we have to do this treatment, and he may deny it, He won't, because to preserve human life, you can go extra mile. All these things that may seem controversial, they're not that controversial in Islam. For instance, the biggest kidney transplant center is all the way in the third world. World's largest kidney transplant center is in Asia, Southeast Asia, Pakistan, in the city of Karachi. I did not know this actually. When a doctor came here, moved here from Karachi city, it's one of the big metropolitan cities, like one of the top 10, huge population. He said it's there in Karachi. He worked there. Like, really? And transplant is a highly debatable issue. So it's getting there, but there's a lot of things Muslims have to do. A lot of Muslims in this country, when they come, their focus is always, a lot of them are very successful parents, children. Their parents are either engineers and doctors, high-level professionals, and then kids are also geared in the same directions. Muslims are not into writing books. I'll tell you, there is part of the blame goes on the Muslims also. In humanities, in education, in sociology, in history, I don't find Muslims, not just here, in other universities. Very rarely you'll find one out of, 30 faculty members once in the blue moon in one or two universities. So once I think they start working in these areas, Islam will all be in limelight. Because it was in limelight, but unfortunately, 9/11 did a lot of damage toward Islam. People have done horrible things in the name of religion or even without the name of religion, but it's sad that this attitude grew further and it became worse in these last elections. But it has calmed down a little bit, I think. So there's a lot of improvement. Local public is interested in knowing that it can't be just true, So there's a lot of open-minded people who are integrating, and there's a lot of intersectionality. So it's a great question. Thank you. Very good one. Other things? Anything else? About Islam, about your knowledge, like you might want to know something. Yeah.
How can we combat or educate people about the stereotypes or perceptions of Sharia law?
Oh, good one. Well loaded, big one. Sharia law. Yeah, so that's another thing. In fact, in so many states, they pass legislations. This is real. Legislations that Sharia law is banned in this state. I'm like, they don't even know what they just banned. It's like, they have no idea. They just think that this is some kind of evil torture cell that's going to be established in our state. And if they see somebody not praying, their religion or not, they're going to grab this guy, put him in the cell, beat him up, make him to confess. If he agrees, fine. Doesn't agree, bring him back, kill him or something. That's a horrible mindset. Or let's say, two guys or two girls, or a guy and a girl are having a relationship outside of marriage or whatever. Doesn't matter what their faith is, they have to be killed. This is the perception that the Western world has been given out. And a lot of this goes to our textbooks that are right now, even the books that are in our libraries. I'm telling you, in my grad studies, I mean, imagine I'm writing something on one topic. I'm not going to go into details. Out of 10 books, I could find only one book that was barely somewhat agreeable. This is how bad things are. So then I don't blame the media and these people, because they have been fed all this information from the grassroots level. I have kids who go to high school, not every high school, but some high schools say, oh my God, I studied in world history class and Islam came to world history as some of the horrible things. I'm like, really? So Sharia happens to be that buzzword to scare people off. Yet Sharia literally means, about, I would say, 10, 12 years ago, I wrote a very brief 2 or 3 page paper, brief one, just to pass it around among non-Muslim acquaintances and friends to teach them what Sharia is. Sharia actually literally means the way. the way of a religion, their lifestyle. Because Islam actually happens to be a religion that claims that it will guide every aspect of your life. Every aspect of your life. I'm sure you're already getting that idea when we mention so many things. And it doesn't have to be from a clergy. Remember, the authority, fundamental authority is this. After prophets are gone, it's this, the book. The book guides people. And this book says Sharia means the way of life. So if someone is in a public restroom washing their hands, everybody washes their hands, but his intention is that I'm washing my hands and my face for prayer, becomes a ritual, right? It is very much part of Sharia. So the only way to dispel this is to explain to people that Sharia is not equal to penal laws. Because they will say Sharia law. That's penal laws, which is, I would say, less than 10% of Islam. Israel, it's a Jewish state. A lot of Judeo-Christian, not is the Jewish law, the Mosaic law actually, is implemented in their day-to-day affairs. Their judges and court systems. So actually they're following the Sharia of Moses. Literally, that's the Sharia of Moses. So is that evil? Access of evil. This is something that has to be brought. Make people think. They have to think. Like, really? So it's like I'm washing my hands and face so you can arrest me, basically. Thank God they don't know that. If they knew that Sharia means even washing or even going to bathroom and using a little bit of water to wash your behind is part of Sharia. It's like they could, all these places where this Sharia law has become, it's funny and stupid and scary at the same time, mixed feelings, where imagine you're going in the bathroom and you're using that, lota, that thing, that looks like, when you go to a Muslim home, like, man, why do you have this thing that you use for the plants? This is supposed to be one of the plants, and you have that thing, like a little bucket. Muslims use water because they believe water is the best way to clean your, private parts when you relieve yourself. So that's part of Sharia. And these idiots who pass all these laws, anti-Sharia, could literally hold somebody in the bathroom, you have to use toilet paper. You can't use water? This is how stupid and ridiculous this thing is. But there has been no education. I blame, part of the blame lies on the shoulders of the Muslims also. We have to educate. We have to, every time there is a friend, acquaintance, you tell them, don't hide it from them. Okay, I have some non-Muslim guests coming, hide this thing. They shouldn't know. Why not? What are you embarrassed about? What's the worst that's going to happen? In one sociology class, a friend of mine, I was not in that class, he said, man, today something horrible happened in class. I'm like, what happened? He said, today my professor said that, do you know there's some people who actually, when they go to the bathroom, they use water to clean. And the class was like, water? After pooping? Ew. Like, it was like, ew. Then next day, professor actually gave them all the scientific facts that this is actually one of the most healthy things to do. And the ew was gone, like, wow. And this professor was not even Muslim. He just made his research and educated people. So, you have a question? Okay.
You mentioned about Sharia law. It has been banned in many, many states.
Oh, of course.
But 3 years
Not in Michigan, though, so you're safe in your bathrooms.
3 years ago, U.S. State Department and Defense Department used the Sharia law to get one of their murderer out from Pakistan remaining games.
Yeah, or actually I call it, I've always talked to you about this. They abused Sharia law for their purpose.
They abused it, but for their own person, they used the Sharia law.
Actually, it happened about 5 years ago during President Obama's administration. There was a CIA agent on the run. Like, who do you think? Like Matt Damon. Think about Bourne, Supremacy, or Identity, one of those. How many of you have seen that? The Bourne movies, right? Just like that. The guy's on the run and he kills civilians, like 2-3 civilians on the run, and killed one of the local agency person also. Now, they're supposed to be allies and working together, but there was something super covert going on that which Pakistani agencies also didn't know. So he actually violated a lot of local laws. So the guy, and again, he was doing espionage. There's no, there can't be a diplomatic immunity. So what they did, the families who suffered from this, there's 2 or 3 people that he killed on the run. They said, what should we do? I said, well, there's only one way. Islam can save you. I said, really? Like, do I have to convert? Like, no. You don't have to convert. Islam will save you. There is a concept called blood money. Offer the family that if you sign a forgiveness, like we forgive you, and in return you compensate. It's a poor family and they will take something from you. So family refused. And there was a strange suicide. And the person that survived in that family, they gave him like, $20,000 or something, said that's a blood money we've paid. That's called in Sharia. In Islam, actually, there's a concept of blood money. That's part of Sharia. Remember, speaking of penal laws, there's something very interesting you should know. If, let's say, there was a road accident because of my mistake, I killed someone because of my mistake. Let's say I was intoxicated, or I was just careless, rash driving. I killed someone. Now, the Islamic law says, because it cannot be determined by the court of law that it's a willful murder. It cannot be considered a murder. So it has to be treated in a different way, which is that my family, myself and my extended family, that's why Islam family system is very strong. We all have to make some collections and compensate that family beside getting my license revoked, beside having a jail time, all of that. Additional. If someone lost a finger, let me give you an idea how much money you have to owe. Is there any person here from Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia is usually looked at always in a negative way, but I'm going to tell you something positive about Saudi Arabia. The reason they still have the lowest crime rate in the world. If someone lost a finger, let's say they lost it, like a cut, because of a fight and I started it, let's say I'm the guilty person. The minimum money that I have to pay currently, according to the penal law, remember portion of Sharia, a portion, is close to $30,000. I'm converting the numbers. If someone loses an eye, because a fist fight happened and I was the aggressor, determined by witnesses and court of law, I have to pay $1 million. $1 million Saudi Riyal, which is close to $300,000. Compensation, beside the jail time. So Sharia is not like a crazy evil thing that the way it has been portrayed. So these are some examples. Other questions, please? We're wrapping up. Last couple of questions. That's it.
I was just thinking, if you kill somebody accident and it's not their family, he means you to get killed. What is the?
Sorry, he what?
If you kill somebody accident and their family wants you to die, and they don't want to take the blood.
Oh, no, they can't. Well, in some cases they can't because it was not an intentional death. It's not like eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. In Bible it says eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and this and that. It's not like that in Islam. There has to be compensation. There has to be other ways. In cases if it's now this is where they had this Sharia law where they abused it because it was a crime against a state. In that case, state is the party, not the victims. State itself is a victim. So, but let's say there was an actual murder. There has been cases, there's been actually videos. You might have seen this Malaysian family right here in America. They forgave the murder of their son right here in America. The judge was crying in tears. So you can still forgive the person. As long as state says that, no, we're not going to let you decide, state will still penalize. There was a famous case in Pakistan. Pakistan is not run by quote-unquote Sharia law, but they use principles from the Quran and teaching of Prophet Muhammad. This rich fellow, he just didn't like somebody, he was trying to bully somebody, a girl actually, in a wedding, and that girl's brother tried to tell him, hey, stop, what are you doing? Just behave, it's my sister. And he said, who are you to tell me this? And boom, boom, he shot him. Like cold-blooded murder right in front of everybody. This guy, the family was approached because it was a very powerful family. So the kid who died, he was the only son of her mother, and the sister was like married or something. So basically, they lost everything. They have nothing left in their home. Just old wife and husband. So actually, she was a widow. They approached her and told her that give a statement on TV that I forgive the murder of my son, and then we'll compensate you also. They forced her. The judge took a notice of this, the Supreme Court justice, and he ordered Interpol to arrest this guy because the guy had fled to Dubai, United Arab Emirates, Dubai. He said, bring him back, and we're gonna try him because he's state is the party now, not you. You can't allow them to abuse the law. You see, so there's lots of checks and balances. This is a law thing, and Prophet Muhammad and his people, there's dozens and hundreds of case studies where all these things are deeply studied. So, but again, this is just a minor portion. Sharia is all Islam. Literally, Sharia, not just the law. I hope that answers your question. Great question, though. It's a good scenario that you brought up. Yeah.
You mentioned that humans were the only ones specifically created by God's hand. What is the position about, is Allah considered more like the grand watchmaker of the universe, who created everything and let it go and then put humans in it? And also, what is the position of evolution and deep time?
Deep time?
Deep time as in like billions of years of history.
Yeah. Good thing is that there is regarding time, I would say Islam does not agree with the biblical timeline of the human history, the human race's history. Islam actually is free of that. Like Quran does not mention any dates whatsoever. It's like it's not even the subject of Quran. It's not the subject of Quran. So if Adam was the first human, it could have been a million, billion years ago. You know, again, when we talk about life, the life of species and life of human race are two different subjects of scientific research and study. I'm sure we all know that, right? So human life, Islam agrees with the name of Adam and Eve with Judaism and Christianity. That's a common thing. But when did that happen, the timeline? Not even a concern. No questions, no worries about it. Like, doesn't matter. Because Quran's subject is human guidance. All these dates and all these, minor details are irrelevant. That's why a lot of times stories of Quran are very brief. And they're mentioned in many different angles. It's like a speech, You're hearing the same story but from a different angle. Or another aspect of that story that it was not shared at that time. That randomization of Quran, Sigmund Freud has this philosophy on a huge discussion about repetition, that why repetition is good for human brain and how it should work. And Sigmund Freud, by no means has anything to do with Islam, actually says a lot of things that actually are a Quranic principle, repetition. So then next part is evolution. Now evolution, there is one evolution which is called like natural evolution, like, humans evolve into different stages, maybe our ancestors, they had different lifestyles, and because of that, maybe for hundreds and thousands of years, maybe they were taller, for instance, or skin colors. All these things, Islam has no worries about this evolution. Now, as far as this concept of making like a time machine and running it on its own, maybe evolution was caused by him. There are some Muslims who believe that he ordered this to happen. It happened with this order. Now, if you look at the Quran in Surah, it's called Fussilat, one of the surahs, I can give you the number later on, in part number 24, he mentions the specifics, like how many days it was for heavens. The 6th day thing, and the 7th day he rested. He talks about that. But he says that there's no concept of rest. He says no. He says even slumber did not touch me. So he talks about how I ordered them to do the thing, and I ordered them to come, and they came. So it looks like that it was not physical, if there is a physical self, if we imagine a little bit. It was not more so that God is physically doing the work. There is some workforce doing the work for him, definitely. That's why this question of, dark matter, a lot of scientists who are on the atheist side of the pool, or the atheist camp, they say, it was this dark matter. And my question is like, okay, what is this dark matter? Couldn't you replace dark matter? Like, no, it was God. You don't know what this is. You haven't discovered anything about it. You're assuming it. Instead of assuming that, how about go to something that is more certain?
Or even all of the major forces in the universe.
All the major forces that he created to work for him, Because forces are also his creation. The ultimate belief in Islam is, it's a very interesting one, it's a lengthy topic, that God, he is the ultimate in charge of everything. He's in control. It's not like, okay, he made like a factory, like, oh, there's a breakage here. Oh my God, there's a wreckage here. What can I do now? What can I do to fix this? No. He's in total control. He mentions that. If you read, one of the biggest subjects of Quran is monotheism. No religion before Islam has monotheism preserved. I'm sure they have talked about it, but it's not preserved in such details. Imagine 86 surahs of the Quran, chapters, are Meccan. They talk all about unseen things, a lot of things that you and I don't see. And then how to deal with it. What should be our relationship with the Creator, the Divine, the angels, and even the jinns, genies. Who are these guys? The race is the race of Lucifer. And he says, no, not all of them are bad. Don't call them all demons. Quran denounces that. So there's good guys, there's bad guys among them too. They have families like us too. Some of them will survive up there, some of them will fail. So things like that. These are 86 chapters. When you look at the Mecca, it says Mecca, that's the chapter you want to look at. It will be mostly dealing with creed, belief systems around these concepts. And it will be clear, like it talks about even leaves, like, fall is about to begin, right? Leaves will start to fall. He says, I have an account of every leaf also. Nothing is outside of my knowledge. He said, even the seed that is buried in the darkest of the darkest earth that I can't find, no gardener, no farmer can find because he lost it. He says, I know where it is. And when I will order that seed, it will sprout. And doesn't it happen with us? It says, it's under my order. I have seen seeds sprouting that, you couldn't even imagine. And it says, similarly, I create. Similarly, life happens. Like so many married couples can't have children. Yet they have same physical relationship and everything. But why? It says it's ultimately my order, which ties into the question of abortion and all that too. A lot of these questions can be resolved. You know how in this country these are political divides. In Islam, there are not political divides. Like in any Muslim country, democratic ones, for instance, where there's elections and stuff, there's no political divide on these issues, be it creation, be it abortion, all these things. So it's a very, very good question. We should have more discussion on that. Great stuff. Should we wrap up? We're 15 minutes above. Well, my 1 hour is good. I'm done.
So you talked about the academia, like for the books here, and information and all that stuff, or can you stay away from that?
Well, not every book. You have to be vigilant. If you see something wrong, point it out to the professor that this information is wrong and that is why it's wrong. And a lot of them will listen to you. It happened to me. First, I was shy, I was reluctant. Then when I brought it up to the faculty, because there's a bias also. It's your faith. How can you handle that? So you tell them that, hey, because of this, I think it's wrong. Because nobody believes that way, so why it's written that we believe this way? For instance, I'll give you a very serious example. Female genital mutilation, female circumcision. It's presented until this day in many of the textbooks here in our university as an Islamic practice. No way, it has nothing to do with Islam. It's a cultural practice, and I'll give you an example. Eritrea, a country where Muslims are 10% or less. 10% or less. Almost every other family has this female circumcision, and it's not even considered a genital mutilation. In America, if somebody did that, they will go to jail. The doctor will lose their license, they'll be jailed. In Africa, it's considered a normal thing. So you see such things, you have to point it out that it's culture, not Islam. It's the culture of that land, for instance. Alrighty, thank you so much. Appreciate the time and patience. Thanks.